It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk boxing. We're going to talk about the latest signings with Zuffa Boxing, and we're definitely going to talk about the financials that were released on not only Anthony Joshua, but Tyson Fury as well. We're going to take a listener question, and we are going to talk briefly about Conor McGregor here in the intro. But before we get into all of those wonderful things and not so wonderful things, I would urge you to pick up a paid subscription. And what this does, it is twofold. It helps us keep the lights on, and it helps you have access to our paywalled content. And trust me, almost every single show has paywalled content because we split our shows in half. You get the first half for free, but if you want to listen to the second half where all the juicy bits are, you got to pony up a few bucks. But the good thing is we're on the lower tier. So what we do is we only charge $5 a month. So pony up a few bucks, help us out, and help yourself out. And while you're at it, share our content around on your socials, whether it's Threads or Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or Blue Sky or YouTube. Please share our stuff because that also helps us out too. Now, John, I had to giggle a little bit when I saw those numbers come out for UFC 329. I know you had a good hearty laugh too, right?
Well, I wouldn't say I laughed. I mean, they were all right. Just not, again, we didn't do Super Bowl numbers. That's the key. But it had some competition. I mean, it had Argentina versus England. And was it Argentina versus England? No, it was Argentina versus who played on Saturday? Now
I don't know.
I can't remember the World Cup game. But yeah, it had a major game, right?
I think it was Argentina-Spain.
No, Spain just beat France. They're going to the championship against Argentina.
Was it Argentina-Norway? Oh.
No, England played Norway. I cannot believe I am drawing a blank on this. But anyways, it's not that important. It'll come back to me later. I gotta apologize too. I can feel myself getting a cold here, as I told Stephanie before the show. I end up getting pneumonia because I have a lot of chest congestion because of my illness. I end up getting pneumonia like every 2 years or so, and you can kind of almost feel it coming on. And I got a feeling I'm heading towards that another week or two. So let's record some episodes so we have some material, I guess, in advance. That's what I'm warning about.
I gotta tell people, just because John calls me Stephanie and not Steffi doesn't mean all of you out there get to do the same.
I apologize
Only John,
for that.
no, it's fine. Only John gets to do that, and his mother. And that's because I'm close to them. But I don't know all of you out there, so Steffi is what I go by. Only the people closest to me get to call me by my full name and have me actually answer.
Oh,
so
okay. I usually try to go by Crooklyn.
Yeah, but you know what? Stephanie is fine for you and your mom. It's A-okay. My husband calls me babe, so I never hear my name in the house. So when I hear you say it, it's fine. But when people online insist on writing out my full name when it's clearly in my handle that I go by Steffi, it sort of grates on my nerves for the people out there that do not know me the way you do. I'm close to you, so it's okay.
But look, I have special permission.
Exactly.
I'm in a special club. Well, my mom, we don't need to give her permission. She'll do whatever the hell she wants anyways.
But when your mom mentions my name, and I've heard her mention me several times, she always says Stephanie, and I think it's super cute. So it's okay. And it's okay for you because we're close. But it's not okay for everybody else out there that I do not know. Those people don't know me. You do. Big difference.
So all you losers out there, stick in your lane and call her the correct name. That's all. That's the rule. That's
the rule right there. Now, I got to go back to this Conor McGregor thing because I saw so many comments out there, and the one that stuck in my head the most was what was his name? Brandon. I sent it to you. Brandon said. Brandon the Truth said, damn, Rousey pulled more numbers than McGregor, and that is correct.
I mean, it's kind of like just like the White House card. This did slightly less than the White House card. Now, the thing is, you got to remember, like we talked about when we compared UFC Freedom 250, the White House card, to those not familiar, with the MVP Rousey versus Carano card, is neither company, the metrics they announced, they didn't use the same ones. So it's almost impossible to do a direct, apples to apples comparison. We can infer, though, that MVP did more viewership just based on the numbers they gave us. But how much more, it's hard to say exactly. But we do have direct comparison to UFC 329 and UFC Freedom 250. And we know that the peak concurrent streams, in other words, the number of streams going on at one time, set a record. They actually did have a higher peak for this event, 8.3 million compared to the 7.9 million at UFC Freedom 250. But the total number of viewers reached, was 15.9 million for this when you can count the US and Latin America together, where it was 17 million for UFC Freedom 250. And that the UFC Freedom 250 had a higher average, 8.2 million to 6.5 million. Now, you also got to wonder, too, how much this was hurt by the main event being an actual just trash because if it lasted a while, you might have more viewers tuning in, which seems to happen in some main events the longer they last. But it's the same thing happened to Rousey and Carano, and so it's I guess the takeaway is it was a successful event, but I'm not sure it's as successful as they'd wanted it to be. I guess the key metric would be looking at how many subscribers they got out of it. And then the next metric is how many people remain subscribed after this event. How many were 1 month subscribers, and how many are consistent, going to repeat subscribers. So that's the question.
Now, I have another question for you. Fred Garvin has been all over this, and he is always entertaining me with his zingers. But one thing that stuck in my head was he said something to the effect, how there was that metric that said so many million people watched at least 1 minute of Freedom 250. And he said something to the effect that commercial breaks dragging it in, or something along those lines, probably accounted for a lot of those people that dragged 1 minute or something like that. Did you see that comment?
Yeah, but I mean, that's possible. It's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge if, and I'm sure they have the data. They can tell when people are hanging around for just 1 minute. But the question is, of the number of people that they count for 1 minute or more, how many only tuned in for about a minute or a couple minutes? What percentage, in other words, what number of them were actually tuning in for 10, 15, 30 an hour, obviously watching some of the broadcast? That would be a key metric you'd want to have, because if you find out a sizable portion of the people were only tuning in for just a minute, right, and then tuned out afterwards, then that would indicate that, maybe they came in during a commercial break and it took a while to figure out they didn't really want to watch this. But based on the average number of viewers, based on the peak number of viewers and the total, I am guessing that the vast, vast, vast majority of the people that tuned in at all tuned in specifically to watch that event, that there's very few people adding up on the numbers that are just watching it for a minute or two. That's going to be my guess, just based on those other numbers.
One last thing from Fred, and this one made me laugh too. This just highlights how comical it was for Paramount to overpay for the UFC. It's apparent that 1, ESPN Plus numbers were inflated by the Disney Hulu package deal, and 2, most UFC viewers already had Paramount Plus in the US. They paid based on a false number that would come over from ESPN Plus. What do you think of that?
I mean, there's no way to know that for sure. At least that's that second part, because we don't know their subscription numbers. They supposedly did like a couple million of new subscribers after the UFC announcement, several million. That would suggest a large number of people perhaps did not have Paramount and were signing on. But how many people does the UFC actually draw as subscribers? That's the question. How many did the Conor McGregor bring on? The Mark Shapiro did an interview. I can't remember where, but recently, and he was pointing out that, they were asking him, why wasn't this on CBS? Why wasn't some of this on CBS to drive up the numbers? And his point is, we were paid to be a subscription driver and retaining product. In other words, our job is to bring subscribers to Paramount Plus, and our job is to retain them. That's what he claims. Now, I think that's the main purpose. That's what they're using it for, because they're paying them so much. In fact, you can somewhat see that they're going to, what they're charging for viewing old episodes now, or old fights, right? So I got a feeling Paramount is looking for ways to recoup some of it. And the number one thing to remember is that I do think they overpaid for the UFC. I think the primary reason they overpaid is, and this is just me reading, between the lines, reading off the work of other reporters, some we've talked about before, but I think the evidence is there that the UFC served a purpose, the executives of the UFC, of helping Paramount get the Skydance merger in and represent an opening, or an extension of an extension of a hand, an alliance to the Trump administration, and so they supported to support them in their endeavor to monopolize the entertainment business. And for that, they're paying the UFC a premium much, much higher than what they would have got otherwise. Will the UFC, is the UFC a property that has value? I think it is. It drives subscribers. But is it a property that's as valuable as they claim it is? I mean, I find that really hard to believe that they're actually worth that much, especially when you remove the pay-per-view the pay-per-view pricing, because that drove so much revenue for ESPN and the UFC historically. Having millions of subscribers paying only $9 a month or whatever they're paying, compared to several $100,000 paying $50 or $60 a pay-per-view. I'm not certain that math is going to come out in their favor. But again, I don't think the primary reason the UFC got this massive deal, they were going to get a bigger deal no matter what. All the analysis looked at it and said they're going to get a step up, a sizable step up from the previous deal. But the reason it's twice as much, the reason it's over $1 billion a year on average, I think in large part has to do with the network connections they have, the ability to get that Skydance merger through, and they were willing to pay extra to get these massive properties passed through the regulatory analysis and regulatory review, and that was worth a lot. But I guess the question is, we will know in another year or two how much this is paying off for Paramount, because if they cannot make money on this, if they cannot find a way or just, make it as a loss leader effective, is there any guarantee in the contract that they can't bring back some sort of two-tiered payment system? Maybe not pay-per-view, but a second tier for UFC fans that you have to pay extra for the numbered events? That's what I'd be looking for in a year or two. If it looks like they are not recouping what they put into, then a second tier payment system, maybe not for all the events, but maybe for a handful per year. And I think Dana White hinted at that during when they originally did the deal, that something like that was possible. I would be looking towards something like that.
A few pay-per-views wouldn't be out of the question.
Yeah. Now, again, other guys have shot it down from the UFC executive side, but we will see. It's too soon now to tell exactly how this is going to play out. Let's just put it that way.
So when you look at these numbers, do you think that Conor's next fight is going to do even as good as this one did?
Well, I doubt it'll do as good as this. I think it'll do good because he's Conor McGregor. There's Kimbo Slice was no good at the end, right? He was still drawing. Tito Ortiz went through a long streak of being bad, losing fights, and was still an attraction. Conor McGregor, starting from a much, much higher place, he's going to draw fans no matter what. So I think he will still draw his next bout. There will be still people intrigued, interested in seeing what he has to do, but what will be the numbers? I think it'll be, lower than this. So is it So is he worth it? Is it the price worth it for what they're paying him? Well, I guess, they're not paying him that much, so it might be worth it. But for what's Paramount paying, I mean, is he going to be a massive driver to subscribers? That's the question. I think that's even bigger question than the ratings themselves. Ratings are one thing, but what they want Conor to do is to drive subscribers, that people feel the need compelled that I have to pay for Paramount because I have to see the Conor McGregor fights. And are they going to feel compelled to subscribe, to watch him limp out there and put on a feeble effort?
It's time to start investing in Paddy Pimblett and Ilia Topuria and people like that. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. It's been time to invest in them for the last several years.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back on track. That was our freewheeling intro there where we just spitballed what we thought about the Conor McGregor numbers. Right now, we're going to get into the show proper. Once again, please subscribe and please share our stuff around. As our OG listeners know, I start every show with the same question, and today is no different. Are there any new filings or updates to the UFC antitrust cases?
Yes, there was. We got something. So something to talk about. They're from the Johnson v. Zuffa case. One we're going to ignore, which is an application to be admitted as an attorney on the case. I don't think anybody really gives a shit about that, right? But the other one involves Dominance MMA's motion to seal. And that is that non-party Dominance MMA. So people are familiar. The plaintiffs have filed a motion for sanctions against Dominance because they have not taken part in discovery process. There's been, they've been asking for Dominance to hand over material to use in the case, communications between them and the UFC executives. Dominance has not, for a bunch of reasons. And Dominance, for those maybe not aware, is Ali Abdelaziz, the UFC manager, the MMA fighter manager, I should say, his management company. And we've been tracking them for discovery noncompliance. So they are moving to seal what's called Exhibit 2 to the plaintiff's motion in order to show cause. And that exhibit is Dominance's discoverable source inventory, which was ordered back by the court, I believe, in August 2025. And so the plaintiffs have filed publicly with I guess when they filed it, had unredacted personal phone numbers and email addresses of numerous non-parties. And Dominance argues that this contradicts the court's own March 3rd, 2026 guidance that personal contact information shouldn't be filed publicly, and that sealing this one exhibit doesn't hide any substance. So then we get the next document that was filed, and this was the magistrate, Judge Wexler. She's the magistrate that handles these kind of, instead of going to Judge Boulware, she handles these kind of issues. And she orders on a related sealing dispute. This is a different one. This was the ruling that Dominance motion, the one, I should say, not a different one, the previous one, sorry, misspoke there. The previous motion to seal, she has a ruling on that. And it resolves the defendants, which is the Zuffa UFC's own motion to redact seal material tied to the spoliation briefing. So on that, the plaintiffs had a statement that denied redaction. Defendants wanted to strike a line about Dana White's communication preferences, and the court found it not confidential business info and is directly relevant to the spoliation theory. So when that gets out, I'll look that up again for our next episode when that gets filed, and we can talk about what exactly that line, that communication they wanted to strike. On Exhibit 1, which was also attached, they granted in part non-UFC email addresses and non-party fighter names may be redacted, as we talked about previously, consistent with prior rulings on improper use. And then on the other exhibit, they denied sealing. The defendants there claimed that the email showed non-public payments and negotiation positions, and the court found it actually just summarizes bouts a fighter turned down with no attached extension letter or real financial terms. So no competitive harm showing was made. So that was denied. So through the through line through all this is the court is drawing a pretty fairly consistent line, the court being Boulware and Wexler. They redact sealed genuine third-party information, phone numbers, emails, non-party names, but are refusing to let the non-parties like Dominance or the UFC to use sealing to keep substantive business or executive conduct material out of the public eye. Dominance's new motion is explicitly built on that framework, arguing that it's only after personal information, not substance, but which tracks with what we got Judge Wexler to grant redactions previously. They're going to probably grant that. So that's the new filings in the case. We will see next week what's been filed, and then we can go through and see what's actually been revealed in these documents.
All right. Now, the meat and potatoes of our conversation today is going to be boxing. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Last week, Zuffa Boxing announced the signing of Shakur Stevenson. Now, how big a signing is this for them?
Well, it's pretty big for them. I mean, it would be pretty big for any promoter. Now, he is not a megastar in the sense like Anthony Joshua is in the UK or Tyson Fury is when he was the heavyweight champion. I mean, Joshua in the UK, I think, was bigger than Tyson Fury, but Tyson Fury, because he had the championship, the potential for big fights with Wilder. Deontay Wilder was probably, a bigger fighter who had the potential to be much bigger if he had beaten Fury. He's not on that level, not on Gervonta Davis, who is, as we know, is a big draw, or even Ryan Garcia has demonstrated. So he's not at that level, but he is becoming an attraction, and he is obviously kind of the best fighter, a best American fighter in the world, skill-wise, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a prestige factor with that. It gives them potential to set up potentially big fights. All those go together. So this is an important big signing for Zuffa Boxing because it shows that their roster is not just, when you get someone like that, it can be kind of a cornerstone for a promoter. Again, not as big as the biggest draws. I would still put David Benavidez ahead of him as a potential draw just because of his style. I think it's just going to start, the more he knocks people out the way he has, the bigger traction he's going to be. And if Boots Ennis gets any sort of presentation the way he performed the last fight, he has a lot of potential. But, Shakur, because he's so talented, so skilled, he's going to start becoming an attraction. And again, it sets up potentially big fights, which they can build off of. So it's an important signing for them.
What do you think is the biggest pitfall that Shakur is going to face with signing with Zuffa Boxing?
Well, tell you the truth, I don't think much of a pitfall. And the reason is because, Zuffa Boxing is not the same entity that when they first launched, right? Right now, and we're going to probably talk about this, I'm sure later in the show, is about the Ali Act, but because, the holdup, there's not this intent to have everything within a walled garden like they originally announced, right? So Shakur is not hurt by that they're not trying to keep him away from all the other fighters. Shakur is allowed to, doesn't have to wear a uniform. Shakur is going to get a ton of money because Zuffa Boxing is paying way above the market rate right now to sign guys like him. And they're going to go out of their way to get him big fights. He already said, he's kind of hinted at some of the big fights potentially. Devin Haney is one that he thinks he wants to have in October. He's already verbally agreed to it. It'd be interesting if that happens. Ryan Garcia or Conor Benn, the winner of that, could be next in line. So they're already kind of setting up a lot of big fights. So, when you talk about pitfall for Shakur, I don't see many for him. I think I don't know the full details of the contract, but compared to, what MMA fighters are used to, and we talked earlier in the week about Paulo Costa, how his contract has these extensions on it, right? These tolling provisions. Those typically don't exist on boxers' contracts, especially high-level boxers. So I'm sure Shakur is pretty protected on the duration of his contract, on the way it can be extended, on what type of offers that have to be made to him, what right he has to approve or turn down fights. He's already hinted on our Hawani show that he has some say in who he faces. So you put that together, and it does feel to me like he has probably signed a multi-fight, let's say 4 or 5 fight deal, which is at his levels fairly lengthy, but he will be paid a lot, and there will be it'll be very difficult, I think, for the Zuffa Boxing or anyone else to hold him up under that contract. Freezing him out is not an option for him, like it is for MMA fighters. So the pitfalls are much smaller for him than you would see in MMA.
Ryan Garcia versus Conor Benn. You mentioned it just a moment ago. It's official for September 12th. Who the heck is promoting this fight? Because all over that poster is a whole bunch of logos for a whole bunch of companies.
Well, it's a traditional co-promotion. They had to come to an agreement. No one had the full rights. It looks like Ryan Garcia, and again, I'm sure we'll talk about his contract. We can go in a little bit about that, but Ryan Garcia has some ability to negotiate, as many boxers do, to negotiate a contract and maybe either give a percentage or get some sort of say by his promoter, Golden Boy. But we have Zuffa Boxing, Golden Boy as promoters. We have both of them have their own platforms that they have to use. They have to use Paramount and DAZN. That was the only way to make it work, and they agreed to it. So it looks like all of them are on the board. We have multiple broadcasters, Paramount and DAZN, as I mentioned, multiple promoters, the classic traditional co-promotion effort right there. And the end result is this fight, which is, it's kind of interesting how I think we're kind of overhyping this fight in some ways. Partly because maybe we've been starved on broadcast television for big fights, partly because Zuffa Boxing it looks like they're making a major push. And we talked about it. This is a weight class we thought they might go all out in and try to make some waves in. But honestly, do you really think Ryan Garcia versus Conor Benn's a good fight? I think Ryan Garcia is going to beat the crap out of Conor Benn.
Yeah.
But I think where the smart play is, if they can really get the Devin Haney Shakur fight made, is then you've set up back-to-back, semi-big. You have a name, Ryan Garcia, might have interest because Conor Benn's known in the UK. There might be some interest in this. But then the winner of this, Ryan Garcia, will move on and take on the winner of Shakur versus Haney. You've kind of set up back-to-back big fights, a trio of them, which is effective use of that kind of roster if they can sign Devin Haney.
Is DAZN still a major player?
Well, are they a major player? They are in boxing because they have every promotion but Zuffa Boxing on the platform now. And they are signing boxers apparently to DAZN themselves. So in boxing, there was some discussion from the executives at DAZN that boxing has been actually one of their major, most successful sports that they use. They put on the platform now. Outside of the United States, the United States, no one has DAZN. It's a fucking black hole. But apparently in Europe and Japan, they have other sports properties. So it's not quite as terrible a property there. It's not quite such a void when no one is watching. But they think boxing has a lot of value. And so they've been sticking to it. But here in the United States, it's a major player because it has all the promoters on it, but it's also a place that no one watches it. And so that's why the TNT deal is so important. The fact that they can get outside onto some sort of more terrestrial broadcast so people can see it. The other thing to keep in mind is DAZN is owned 10% by the Saudis, right? Mm. And so if DAZN is dependent on the Saudis and we know Zuffa Boxing is 60% owned by Saudi Arabia, they're playing both sides of the field here, and eventually, will they make a choice on who to back more? Which one to throw their weight behind? If they really think they can turn Zuffa Boxing into another UFC, WWE, I could imagine. I wouldn't be shocked that they would basically dictate to DAZN to or throw the DAZN Boxing overboard, and try to set it up that the fighters that they want and the talent that they want goes over to Zuffa Boxing. So I'd keep an eye on that as well. I'd be a little concerned if I'm a promoter with DAZN. I'd be somewhat concerned about that they're the number one concern obviously is that no one's watching the platform. The other concern is that people are signing that they seem to be going after fighters and signing them directly to DAZN. And then the third is that the Saudis have a 10% stake. Sella has a 10% stake in DAZN, while also being in the joint venture with TKO, they're the senior partner, the majority owner of Zuffa Boxing. And so, I'd be keeping my eye open on that because I'd be a little concerned about the relationships there.
Do we know how much longer Ryan Garcia is signed to Golden Boy?
No one knows really for sure. There's been lawsuits going on for years about this. Back in 2023, Garcia filed a lawsuit against Golden Boy to get out of his deal. That fell apart. And then we got, and then there was a more recent suit that was renegotiated. So I think that was just in June this year, actually the most recent, because Golden Boy sent cease and desist letters to Dana White, Zuffa Boxing, TKO Group, and the Saudi Arabia Sella. And he alleged they're all trying to bypass Golden Boy's deal. Now, Ryan Garcia said multiple times that he has one fight left, right? Oscar de la Hoya says that no, he has multi-year agreement left. So I don't know exactly. I do know that because of this joint venture, right, that they're doing, this co-promotion event, this joint DAZN Paramount Plus, Garcia was forced to sign a contract extension, according to him, for at least one more fight. So if he was correct in the first place, then only had one fight. Now he has this fight and still another fight. But it's also possible that Golden Boy or Oscar, because there were so many extensions, and maybe because Ryan Garcia did not read, as we saw with the Virgil Ortiz case, that the language Golden Boy seems to have mastered is a little nebulous, right? And maybe Ryan Garcia has provisions in the contract he doesn't fully understand, which would give Golden Boy some more additional time to Garcia. So maybe it's not just one fight. So long-winded answer is I don't freaking know for sure, because everybody's saying something opposite. And this might have to be settled in court. I do know, though, that Oscar has made it clear that he does not want to be a passive promoter that just gets a piece. Some promoters do that. In fact, Zuffa Boxing's contracts, they allow a promoter to sign over their fighter to Zuffa Boxing and get a percentage of the purses going forward, so they don't have to do anything. And Oscar, made it clear he doesn't want to do that. And you can see why he doesn't want to, because he's able to leverage someone like Ryan Garcia to get a DAZN deal, where if he was just leasing him out and making, sure, it might be easier money, might even be greater money, but he would have nothing to show for it because, Ryan Garcia is by far his biggest star. And he needs someone like that to even get something like a DAZN deal.
What are your thoughts on Zuffa Boxing counter-programming the UFC Noche event?
Well, I think it just kind of demonstrates that the Noche event is not a priority, right? I mean, it was always kind of a gimmick. They took advantage of the moment that Canelo Alvarez could not be booked on Mexican Independence Day, and they took advantage of that to book their own UFC event. And then they tried to make it into something bigger when they did the Sphere the next year. And they kept promising we're going to go to, we're going to go to Mexico and do an event there. And that didn't work out. And now I think it's just kind of like a lot of things for a while, it's a big thing. It's a priority, but I think they've come to the realization that there's just, maybe there's just not worth the energy to put that much into Mexico going forward, just that they can give away doing, because the schedule's made out, because where they want to have their events lined up, it doesn't line up with Mexico, and it's not that big a priority to have an event there. And I think that this kind of indicates it, that boxing, getting Zuffa Boxing off the ground, appealing to the Mexican crowd is more important for boxing than it is for MMA. And I'm sorry, I was a little distracted during that because I got a text message. Now I'm going to tell you what it tells me, but I'm not 100% certain this is accurate, but the source is pretty good. But I was asking about what Ryan Garcia's contract is. And according to them, Ryan Garcia has supposedly has 2 bouts remaining. I think they're even implying that there's a question about that because no one can come to the terms. But Garcia is the A side of this match, according to the contracts. And that, it does sound like maybe Golden Boy is, even though they're on the poster, I don't know if Golden Boy is playing a full part as the promoter. It looks like they might be getting a 20% fee for the event. So that's, again, take that with a grain of salt.
All right. Now, our friend, Mind of B, he's our friend and our subscriber, Mind of B on Twitter, all lowercase, He alerted us to Anthony Joshua's Sparta Promotion Limited financial filings. And that's something that you'd been keeping an eye on yourself, but he was eagle-eyed a little bit because you were traveling and he caught on to it. And so he alerted us to it. What did those filings reveal?
Well, it was a new filing for Sparta Promotion, which is the company that Anthony Joshua uses for his boxing promotion, where the revenue goes through. It's basically just a boxing enterprise. And in addition to that, we'll talk about a little bit later, I guess, is Tyson Fury's limited company also came out. So, but for Joshua, when you look at Joshua's earnings, what it tells us is that in 2025, and I guess it ends in February 28th, 2025 is the end of his annual fiscal year for his Sparta Promotions Limited. And he claimed in that year, his turnover, that's the British word for revenue, they use turnover, was 41.5 million British pounds. So in dollars, that's about $55 million. And that covers the France and Ghana win in Saudi Arabia and the Dubois loss in England, right? He got his ass kicked, got knocked out. So we could look at that and we can assume, now it doesn't 100% it doesn't probably line up maybe 100%. There might be, I'll get into this in detail in a second, but maybe there's some revenue somewhere else. We're not 100% certain, but I'm betting that almost all that revenue comes from his boxing enterprise because as it says in it, it's a boxing promotion plus endorsement sponsorship entity, Sparta Promotions. And he reported on top of the turnover of 41.5 million British pounds, he also reported 25.6 million in profit and a dividend payment of 10.1 million out of that. I don't think those numbers are as useful or as important. I think the number one thing to take away from Sparta Promotion is the turnover. But it shows that over the years, he has been making a fortune because if you go back to 2020, we will see that that's the year that he fought Andy Ruiz twice. He had something like $63 million in turnover that year. So if we convert it to British pounds to US dollars, we are talking in the neighborhood about 80 some million. In 2021, the year that ended them, after he fought Pulev, that's behind closed doors during the pandemic. He had turnover of 15.6 million pounds again, so that's over 20 million US dollars. His first Alexander Usyk loss was over 20 million pounds, which is 27 million US dollars. His second fight in Saudi Arabia jumped up to 41 million pounds, so 58 million, not 58, sorry, 55 again million US dollars for that fight. And then he had a series of fights in 1 year through the year 2023 up until February 2024 against Franklin, Helenius, and Whalen, where he made about a little over 40 million US dollars. So you can see that Joshua is a very lucrative fighter. Maybe he's not quite Canelo. Canelo does more, but he has been highly paid as a boxer, and he is still raking it in. Now, we haven't seen what his Jake Paul payment is, and I doubt we will because it looks like he is moving the company to the United Arab Emirates where he does not have to file anymore. So we might miss out on how much Netflix paid him for that Jake Paul fight. But up until now, we can see that he has been, making a tremendous amount of money.
Is Sparta Promotions Limited the only filing we need to look at to see Joshua's finances? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!